Hello everyone and welcome back to Beyond the Veil background information. It's been a little while now, about a month since I last did a recording, and thankfully all my wonderful trips to the dentist and my dealings with the dentist have been dealt with. So hopefully I won't have to worry about that again. But anyway, let's get into it. We're starting with another Angels one from the Angels and Demons lot. And this one actually is debatable whether you could refer to them as an angel or a demon. It really depends on your interpretation. So let's get into it. We'll be talking about Sammael. Now, as always, I start off with a little quote from one of my stories where the character's mentioned, or if they've got a part, they'll have a quote of their own. Then we'll talk about the information I've taken from things like actually all the information I have about this being that I felt was relevant to what I was developing, and then I will give you the character profile. So let's get into it. Isn't this just a typical situation from the bloodline of Sammael? Falling in love with someone else's mate and stealing them away, ignorant to the chaos they bring and the damnation to her? Congratulations, Ascaris. But this isn't just a simple matter of stealing my girlfriend. I own her, and only one of the princes of hell can break this contract. Quote from Blood Guardian. Enter the bad boy of angels, the great destroyer, the venom of God, and yet the necessary evil that might be deemed the left hand of God. Sammael is, or Samuel, however you want to pronounce that, is one of those beings who could just be the archetype for Satan, the devil, Semyaza, Lucifer, or indeed a form of all of them. Yet is indeed separate and very, very interesting. Sometimes called Samuel, or even Archangel Samuel is the accuser, seducer, and destroyer. But if they are a fallen angel is debatable indeed. To begin with, most people probably tend to come across Sammael's name in stories of Lilith, but his most important role in Jewish law has him as the main angel of death and the head of the Satans being accusing angels sent to test faith. For these necessary duties, Midrashic texts count him as among God's angels, but Christian sources equate him regularly with the devil. Of course, I see Satan, Lucifer, and the devil as separate entities. I will discuss another time. And Sammael, I do count as part of the host, like the other angels of death. But in pop culture, at least, their name is given constantly to a fallen angel or someone with dark purposes. This seems strange, as for being the head of the Satans, they are said to condone man's sins. But with Sammael, I will say it's easier to refer as masculine, as this is what they are often denoted as for seducing Lilith, though in some ideas they are linked to the serpent of Eden. Some say riding it like a camel rather than taking its form, and one lone source even suggests them the sire of Cain, but that's just one source. Now, once again, Sammael is another angel of death equated with the Grim Reaper. They are also equated to Typhon in the 3 books of occult philosophy. Something I've found has influenced my thoughts on them too, but sources really do vary on what and who Sammael is. They are considered the guardian angel of Esau, under the name Sammael, the guardian angel and prince of Rome, thereby enemy to Israel, but also Enoch describes them as one of the watchers to have fallen. But their first mention is in the Second Temple period, and right after its destruction. But Enoch is also said to be the first time he's mentioned. Some say he lives in the 5th heaven, others the 7th, and that he was the one to collect the soul of Moses when he died. But some, especially in recent demonology, suggest Sammael was the angel of death sent to take the lives of Egypt's firstborn. But I have found no references to such things in older apocryphal pieces. It literally seems to be just something added in recent demonology. The Angel Dictionary quotes from Revelation 12, that great serpent with 12 wings that draws after him in his fall the solar system. Another description in Job 28:7 states he does not know the path to the tree of life, even though he flies through the air, has one longer hair in his navel, and as long as it remains intact, his reign will continue. However, in the Greek apocalypse of Baruch, where he's the dominant evil figure, it's suggested that Sammael actually planted the tree of knowledge when he was banished and cursed by God to come back to tempt Adam and Eve. In the Ascension of Isaiah, he's being identified with Melchior, the king of the wicked. Melchior, messenger of evil, Belkira, Lord of the Wall, and Bachira, chosen by evil. My pronunciations are probably bad on that one, I do apologise. Not to mention he's equated to Belial as well. It is stated in the Zohar that Sammael is the dark angel who wrestled Jacob, and yet later held back his hand to prevent him from taking his son's life in sacrifice. Though we can recall Azazel being mentioned in this sort of role, and there's lots of mixing of Sammael as Azazel and Azrael. He's also thought to be the one who tempted David to number Israel, and Targum Jonathan to the prophet stated that Genesis 3:6 claims, and the woman saw Sammael the angel of death. Waite's Holy Kabbalah characterizes Sammael as God's severity. In the Grimoire of Armadale, it's stated he is both fallen angel and heavenly, and will teach magic, necromancy, and occult sciences, as well as jurisprudence, and yet St. Gregory lists him under Sammael as one of the 7 archangels. I will be honest, there's a lot about him I do recommend you can look at the jewishvirtuallibrary.org/Sammael. Right, to get much more information, as a lot of other sources tend to repeat or skim down, and I can't list all of it when there's a lot I don't pull into my interpretation. And seriously, they're good for a lot of the information on these angels that are actually mentioned. So I would take a look into that if you want to actually find out something interesting. Anyway, now towards the Lilith idea. Except she's not only his partner, with Moncure Daniel Conway's Demonology and Devil Lore stating he is also consort to the voluptuous maiden Namar, and functions as the left hand of God. Indeed, he is also said to be married to Agrat Malat and Eshef Zenuim, sorry, I cannot pronounce that, who are listed as the angels of prostitution. Now, as for how Sammael ended up with Lilith, that is a question. Not until the second half of the 13th century in Kabbalah do Sammael and Lilith end up being referred to as a couple. Lilith, of course, was Adam's first wife, who left after refusing to go beneath Adam, for they were made of equal things, and so in the wilderness paired with demons to produce 100 spawn every day that would hunt the daughters of Eve. The demons she paired with turns into Sammael in these later texts, and includes producing a son called the Sword of Sammael. Later pieces equate them as opposites to Adam and Eve, with one stating that God castrated Sammael to prevent the world being filled with his demonic spawn. There's no story of how they met up, however. Now, just briefly before we discuss my profile and idea for Sammael within the Veil, especially because he's pretty big there, I just wanted to talk about another inspiration for Sammael, or indeed the story I have for the Angels of Death in the Veil. Now, I chose to talk about it here with Sammael just because it felt just like the right place, but as many of you may have guessed, I have a lot of influence in my characterization of angels and demons within the Veil from John Milton's Paradise Lost, and the story I have for the awakening of the Angels of Death has sort of a link to that. In Paradise Lost, Satan's leaving hell to look for Earth, when he comes across 2 beings, a female that is half serpent and surrounded by a pack of dogs, and a male figure cloaked and grim. These are Sin and Death. We learn from Sin that for the pride that Satan had committed, in his mind he'd birthed Sin, and yet also impregnated her with Death, only for Death to have taken his mother, so that she produced these hounds that tormented her. In the story, they then choose to assist Satan in finding Earth, and once there, God permits them to stay there. Now, I like the idea of Satan, or in my stories, Lucifer, awakening death and bringing it into the world, and so that inspired me with my little idea of where the angels of death came from. But also, I considered Sin and their relationship with death, and the horrible creatures she's born, and I thought about how it kind of made me think of Sammael and Lilith's relationship. Lilith is doomed to produce monstrous offspring, the majority of which die every day of her life through her mating with Sammael, and the hounds Sin produced that torment her remind me of this. It's an odd sort of connection, I suppose, but it just triggered a thought in my head, and that's mostly what inspired my idea where the Angels of Death came from, at least in a tiny bit. Just thought I should throw that in there. Now, let's do Sammael's profile. Name, Sammael. Position, Angel of Destruction and Death. Story featured in various, particularly Blood Guardian. Role, helpful grandfather. Gender, male. Description, great red-skinned, black-winged, black-horned like the great horns of the bull, and overly masculine with thick, long, dark with long dark locks of hair, and from his navel one long black hair that's strong and holds all his power. His nails are black, and his eyes are black. His voice is deep and resonating, and his laugh callous, and he is bearded, and at times he appears with a dragon's tail. Round Hell. Abilities: as long as his navel hair remains, there is balance in the world, and the need for good to go against evil exists. He can destroy anything with the powers granted to him by the Almighty, and can also kill many in one swoop. He carries a sword upon him that can be used to kill a mortal when swept to the left, and then when swept to the right can release the souls of fallen soldiers or people who have died in such tragic events to enter judgment. Master, the Almighty, and Lucifer. Personality: tumultuous and aggressive, they are violent and booming, never one to just sit and wait, but always eager for action. They wish to do their duties and punish all those who sin upon earth with an early death, but he has a curiously affectionate side. Though he is not too keen on the angels of prostitution given to him, Lilith and the spawn he has with her are of great importance to him, and he does not wish them death but wishes them life always. He is also split between his duty and his family presence, that it can stun those they that it can stun those that do not understand that he is not a fallen angel but a heavenly being despite himself. Relations: Sauriel. His brother Sammael does not like how patient and blunt Sauriel can be, but adores his brother, and yet they argue often. Azrael. His baby brother Sammael quite adores his youngest brother, and Azrael alone can calm him. Lucifer. Preferring Lucifer to the Almighty because Lucifer's affection comes with no restrictions to what he does. Sammael enjoys coming to hell to witness the sinners being tormented and spending time speaking to Lucifer, if only because Lucifer lets them roar and shout as much as he chooses. Lilith. The love he had never expected to have but seemed destined to. Sammael would do anything for Lilith, and that has sadly meant having to have other wives, as well as watching his children die every day. Still, he would not give up Lilith for anything, and often ponders if it was determined to be this way because of the veil. Eshehef Zenunim. Sorry, I really can't pronounce that one. One of the angels of prostitution that lives as a bride. She is often the most vocal of his brides, and they argue a lot. Nema. The most beautiful under Lilith, their relationship is purely physical, and Sammael is rarely beside her for any other reason, as she often takes others to her bed too. Agrat Bat Merlat. A true demoness, Sammael finds she understands his anger best, but always offers him to break the rules and just destroy everything, so he tempers himself around her. Sword. His eldest son by Lilith, Sword is as destructive and dangerous as his father, but is obedient to him and to his mother, and yet, unlike them, shows great patience and will often cancel his father's desires to destroy things. The Lilin and Lilitu. His sons and daughters by Lilith that escaped into the veil. He remembers all their names, adores them greatly, and does whatever he can when they ask him for help, so long as they do not kill the innocent around him. Malaria. His favourite granddaughter, he often states that her choice to become a reformed demon, despite being one of the great diseases his pairing with Lilith produced for the world. Sammael does his best to aid her where he is permitted, and her children, if only because he feels they are the future of the veil. History. Created in the beginning but kept in slumber, Sammael and his two brothers were awoken by a mistake Lucifer made in not only leading a being to its death, but equating a face and knowledge of death to the world. Sammael was awoken and presented themselves to Lucifer, who brought them to heaven, but they were forced to sit back at the gates and await instruction. When the gates were forced open as Lucifer rebelled, only Sammael entered the fray, his sword forming and his abilities growing as he flew through the realm of heaven and cut the wings off any being that came into his way, releasing his fury and provoking the recklessness and casualties of war. When the battle was over, Sammael was bound to calm his fury, and was then tossed into hell with Lucifer, but his wings were not cut, and instead his presence was deemed necessary. Upon being unbound by Lucifer, Sammael found that until the first sinful act, he could not escape hell in order to perform his duty. Frustrated to be pushed into another seeming slumber, Lucifer, Belial, Beelzebub, and Asmodee were able to have Sammael aid them into entering the earth without the constraints of heaven, by not entering the paradise of Eden. Here they would watch through the garden walls and see the fate of man through Adam and Lilith. They witnessed the other angels bow to Adam, and though none of them bowed, upon seeing Lilith, Sammael bowed, and Belial noticed. Belial convinced Sammael that, as he was still an angel, he could enter Eden as long as he lay his sword at the gate with the angel protecting it. Sammael did as was asked, and found himself following Lilith around, fascinated by her, and then discovering the tree of knowledge. Here he found himself wishing that the knowledge was given to Lilith so that she could understand him, and see him, so he took some of the sap from the tree, and when she was asleep, painted it upon Lilith's forehead. For nights they would speak and learn about one another, Lilith learning her equality to Adam, as well as what it meant to be desired by someone. She could not comprehend it, but when the angels later gave command for them to pair as the animals did, Lilith was infuriated by Adam commanding her to be beneath him, and not to let him be beneath her. Why should the act have some specific position to it that made one more powerful? The pair argued, and the angels were shocked. Lilith, though, began to understand that Adam had none of the feelings Sammael had expressed, and so she left Eden, Sammael following after her. Out in the wild, Sammael offered her fruit he had taken from the tree of knowledge, if she wished to understand, but Lilith requested instead to pair with him and become a demon. Sammael refused and insisted she was not made for him. He escorted her back to Eden, only to find that Eve had been created. Lilith confronted Eve, but was met by 3 angels who informed her that she was not destined to be the mother of mankind. With that, Lilith then stated she would destroy mankind and take the form of a demon, letting her children ravage the world Eve's would live in. Sammael hurried to Lilith's side and he paired with her, but refused to leave her as her body was overwhelmed by the demons bursting within her. The 3 angels came to her, and when she birthed her first 100, they killed all but one that Sammael lifted to him. Sammael scolded them, insisting that the children were half angel and that the Mastema had been permitted life. The 3 angels, though, stated the children were half demon, and only a few would be born with a soul. So Lilith made a deal that the names of these 3 angels could be used to hold back her children from killing mankind, in order for there to be a chance for them to live. Each day Lilith bore 100 offspring, and Sammael would come to her as would Azrael. Sammael would gather up some of his children that he was permitted to, as the others were killed, and these he and Lilith raised in the world and taught to be happy and enjoy their lives. But when Adam and Eve were expelled from Eden, Sammael soon found himself busy with his duty as an angel of death and destruction. He came to his wife every day and was with his children outside of his duty, but as Lilith was then commanded down into hell, she was joined by 3 other females that were thought to be the most sinful of beings, and Sammael was summoned by the Almighty. He was warned that there would be a great decision to come from him, the chance to utterly destroy or the chance to save. It would cost him, but he would only gain the chance to choose if he agreed to have the other 3 as brides to him. Sammael did not understand why this was. He assumed it was relating to the Almighty still having issue with Lilith, and so he agreed, but no children were produced by these females. Then the time to choose came with the great flood. Sammael's children were living happily upon the world, and the demons and creatures they'd produced had made the world richer. Sammael was offered to wipe out all life but those marked by the Almighty, including his own children, or to choose a way to save them. Sammael chose to have his children survive, and so he was given an image of the world and told by the Almighty that only where his power touched it would he be able to save his children. Sammael knew if he held down his left hand he could only cover one place, but he transferred all the powers to the hairs upon his body and began to cut them. He shed his hair down to just one long strand hanging from his navel, and the world was coated in pockets of safety that almost spanned half its true form. The Almighty agreed that this land would be cut off from the world, free of the flood, but that the chance of those born there to have a soul would be deemed by their actions, and they would be judged more harshly than man. Sammael agreed to this, and with it the veil was created, and Sammael's children were saved and given a chance. Final comments. I have an odd fondness for Sammael, and within my universe I sort of played them into this big, devoted grandfather figure that has a real care and fondness for the veil he helped create. But I mostly enjoy how he is mentioned rather regularly as Malaria's grandfather in the Blood Shadows series. Plus, he's one of the few angels of death that, in the veil at least, is spoken about with a familiarity that's not necessarily depressing. But yeah, he's an interesting one, and I hope you found this interesting. Thank you very much for listening.